So I remember I went to the Provo MTC and I got my flight itinerary and I was traveling alone. I was the only person from the Provo MTC going to my mission. And I was so nervous that I'd show up in the airport and no one would be there to pick me up and I'd have no way to contact them. And I got sent to the El Paso, Texas airport, and then my mission president came and picked me up and drove me across the border to my mission. But I got there and my flight had been delayed and I talked to church travel on the phone and there'd been a lot of confusion and they told my president that I'd be getting in at 8 and I got in at 7. And so I was sitting there for 30 minutes going, there's no one in this airport. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then my mission president was very punctual, so he showed up at 7:30 to be 30 minutes early for me getting there at 8, but I'd already been waiting. So it was an interesting first impression. He shows up and, Hermana Clark, what? What are you doing here? But it was fun. And then I got to ride alone with my mission president and his wife across the border into my mission. And I was so overwhelmed because they spoke Spanish so fast. And I knew Spanish, but did not understand most of what they were saying. But that first night was fun. I stayed in a hotel with another sister who had come from the Mexico MTC, and she was from Guatemala. Also didn't understand what she was saying. And I just remember feeling, okay, here you go, ready to be humbled, and you're gonna learn Spanish for real, and you're just gonna try to love people and figure it out. But the next day I met my trainer, and she actually spoke pretty good English because she'd been studying it in college before she came out on her mission. She was Mexican, and that was such a tender mercy to have a trainer who spoke good English. And she thought that it was a tender mercy that I spoke good enough Spanish that we could communicate really well. And I remember we got in the taxi to leave the mission office to go to our area on my first day, and she just started chatting with that taxi driver. I just remember that she contacted that guy, and she just set a great example from the first moment that you need to talk to everyone about the gospel and about your role as a missionary and invite everyone to learn. So the Mexico Ciudad Juarez mission was formed in 2013. It used to be part of the Mexico Chihuahua mission, which was the whole state of Chihuahua. But now our mission is just the northern portion of Chihuahua. It touches the border with El Paso, Texas, and some of New Mexico. You could split my mission pretty well into two parts. You're either in the city in Ciudad Juarez, or you're near the Mormon colonies in this area called Casas Grandes. And honestly, when we would get transferred between anywhere in Ciudad Juarez and anywhere in Casas Grandes, we'd kind of sometimes feel like we were changing missions because the culture is very different in those demographically different areas. I spent 9 months in Casas Grandes and 9 months in Ciudad Juarez, so I got a good taste of both. Pretty much everyone is Catholic, which is pretty typical of any mission in Mexico. But we also would get people from different Christian denominations that we'd teach. I taught a Jewish person once, which was super interesting, but mostly everyone's Catholic. And our most effective way of finding people was usually street contacting. We did not knock doors. We weren't supposed to, unless we got the direct inspiration and revelation that we needed to knock a specific door. We never did that. So you just talk to everyone that you run into on the street. If you're on a bus, you talk to the person sitting next to you. You do anything you can to meet anyone and try and invite them. In the areas I was in Ciudad Juarez, I was in a lot of the more wealthy areas that had like a lot of gated communities that we weren't allowed into without an appointment. And mainly they had people driving cars, not really walking in the streets, so we had to get pretty creative with how we found people to teach. The members were really helpful in giving us referrals. We just needed to have a good relationship with them in order to find investigators. They'd help a lot. One thing we did that was maybe weird, but it was really fun, and it probably only makes sense in Mexico, is that we got these posters that had the questions of the soul from Preach My Gospel on them, and we stood at an intersection as a district, and we'd hold up the posters, and then when the light would turn red, we'd run out in between the cars and knock on their car windows, and they'd roll down their window, and we'd say, have you ever asked one of these questions before? And they'd say, well, yeah, like, what is the purpose of this life? And we'd say, we have a book that answers your question, and we'd love to bring one by your house. If we could get your information, we'll come by another day and bring you the answer to this question that you've had. And we got to pass a lot of referrals along to other missionaries that way. So that was an interesting, maybe weird way that we found people. In Casas Grandes, it's a way slower pace of life than in the city. It's slow. There's not a lot of cars passing. There's like more dirt roads, a lot of dust, which is fun. The people were more humble in certain ways in Casas Grandes, and they just didn't live as fast-paced of a life. And it's interesting there because they have two Mormon colonies, Colonia Juarez and Colonia Dublan, and there's a temple in Colonia Juarez. And so most people know Mormons, and there are a lot of members. There are a lot of inactive members, but really everyone knows a Mormon or has a family member who's Mormon. There's also a temple in Ciudad Juarez, so there are two temples in our mission. Almost everyone is within less than an hour of a temple. My mission has 7 stakes. There's 2 in Casas Grandes and 5 in Ciudad Juarez. So there's a lot of members, but there are a lot of less active members. Something that we found to be successful was seeking out less active families, because a lot of them were part-member families, and we were able to find people in their families to teach while trying to help them come back to church. Especially by the colonies. That was the way that we'd work a lot. But for the most part, all of the active members help out a lot. And so the best thing to do is to become very close with the members and work together. And yep. I went to the MTC in June of 2015, and I came home in December of 2016. I served in 4 different wards in Ciudad Juarez and in 1 ward in Casas Grandes, and I was in each of those places for 9 months, in each of those cities. My 4 wards in Ciudad Juarez, I was in 1 for 4 weeks, 1 for 5 weeks, 1 for 6 weeks, and 1 for 5 months. And in Casas Grandes, I was in 1 ward for 9 months. They're really loving and accepting and open people, and they're really giving, which I loved. Oftentimes you will be going to house after house for lessons, and you cannot leave their house without eating. They won't let you. They want you to at least drink a cup of water, but they also will usually want to offer you food because they just want to give what they have because they're so kind. And that being said, when you go to eat with members, you eat with members at about 2 in the afternoon. That's when a big meal is in Mexico. Dinner isn't their bigger meal. And sometimes they'll give you a lot of food, and sometimes if you don't eat all of it, they think that you didn't like it. You just have to learn how to either eat a lot more food or how to just really tactfully tell people thank you and that it is so good and that you really are full. But it's hard to master, so you really need to practice that. And if you're serving yourself, do not serve yourself too much. It's better to go get seconds than be leaving stuff on the plate and making the person who cooked it for you think that you didn't like what they made. Sisters, well, in Mexico, people greet each other with a kiss on the cheek and usually also a hug or a handshake at the same time. Sisters will greet other women with a kiss on the cheek, but not men, and elders don't ever greet anyone with the kiss on the cheek. It's also a good skill to learn how to deflect if someone who's not supposed to kiss you is trying to. They're never trying to do it maliciously, they just are trying to greet you. So it can be really awkward sometimes. If some guy my age that I contacted is trying to like kiss me on the cheek, I'm like, leaning back. Don't kiss me, that's awkward. You just need to find a way to, I don't know, say hi to people before they can get in and do that. So practice. Mexican culture changes a lot between states. I was in the north. It was interesting to me. I had 5 Mexican companions, all from central and southern Mexico, and it was interesting how they had to adjust to being in the north and having a different culture. So it was good for me to try and just pick up how people in the north act and how they speak, different words they use, so that I could explain that later on to companions who'd been there less time than me, or to my companions who I trained, who were Mexican and maybe having a hard time realizing that they were in a different culture when they thought that they'd be in the same one, having been in the same country. So most people don't arrive to El Paso and get taken to the mission. Most people get to the airport in Juarez, but I was sent to El Paso and crossed the border there. So my mission president and his wife picked me up, and we were able to drive in super easily without a problem, but because I was applying for a green card to be a temporary resident, we had to go into an office there and I had to sign some paperwork. But it was really quick, and then we just got on our way on the mission. Crossing back to the United States is the more complicated thing to do. When we go home, all of the American missionaries are crossed over to El Paso and fly home from the El Paso airport because it's quicker and cheaper. So one of the counselors, the mission president, took me. I was, again, the only American going home on my day, but usually it's a group, that I got taken up, and he had a pass to go through the fast lane across the border so he could cross in a few minutes. But if you don't have that, the line is really long and it can take a few hours to get into the United States because you're waiting in this line of cars. So what he did was, I got out with his wife and my suitcases, and he drove across with his fast pass because he was allowed to, and then we walked over the bridge that is the border. It was really steep and with suitcases, so it was a really good workout. We walked all the way across it, then I went through the security on the United States side and put my suitcases through, and then they cleared me to go through. I also had to turn in my green card and tell them that I wasn't planning on living there again soon. So that was what it was like. It's kind of like an airport security, but maybe not as elaborate. I haven't heard too much about crazy border crossing. Mostly any experiences I have are with immigration laws that we were having to follow being there as foreigners, because you have to renew your green card after having been in the country for a year. And one time this sister, it was the secretaries in the office are supposed to regulate that because we have no idea what to do. And there was a sister who had gone way past her year mark without having renewed her green card when the elders realized that she hadn't done it. And she had to travel between Juarez and Casas Grandes a few times. And in order to do that on the charter bus that you take, you have to have your green card. And so I think she did it like 3 times. The first time she had like an expired paper saying that it was in process, and they said, that's expired. She said, oh, it's the wrong one, and they let her go anyway. The one time she pretended that she didn't speak Spanish, and the elders were like trying to, eventually they got her onto the bus to go to Casas Grandes. It was kind of crazy. So, stay on top of your green card. But, yeah, nothing too crazy, really. On the Mexican side, it's harder to get to the United States. A lot more complicated. Don't lose your passport or your green card. Ciudad Juarez is pretty big, I think. I mean, it's pretty big compared to other cities I've lived in. There's 5 stakes, and each one is pretty different with, I don't know, how wealthy the people are who live there. The sisters mainly stay in the wealthier areas because they're the safer areas. And so I was in really rich places. But where I was, there would be gated communities with guards at them, and you had to have an appointment to get in. You weren't allowed to contact inside of them. But they were usually really nice people if you could get to them. They were great. There's buses that's how you get around between areas. If you're doing exchanges, that's how you get to the mission office. That's, in some areas, they're big enough that you have to take a bus to proselyte. And they call it La Ruta, which is not normal in any other place that speaks Spanish. So you just have to get used to that. The buses, I think they're old American school buses that got taken over there, and they've been painted, and they decorate them, and they play really loud Mexican music, and it's fun. And there's a random assortment of seats that are lined up this way and lined up against the side. And if you go on a Sunday morning, everyone is on their way to Mass, and you're on the way to church, and everyone will fit. No matter how tight it is, everyone will fit on a bus, so you can have some fun experiences there. So most people, no matter where you're from, if you get called to Ciudad Juarez, you'll have some people who've heard of it, and they react, and, oh no, you're gonna die, or no, it's super dangerous, or I had a lot of people say, they send sisters there? Or they send American sisters there, and people thought it was really a sketchy place. And if you Google it, that's what you're going to find, articles from about 2010 that are talking about all of the cartel violence, and there was a serial killer, and there was all sorts of horrible things. When you go now, like obviously like any big city, there's crime, but that happens wherever you go, there's a big city. It's about the same as any other one. There are much more dangerous places in Mexico now than that place. Mostly what I would find is people who had a lot of scars from experiences with all the violence during that time. But I personally was never robbed. I never saw a gunfight. I know other people have, but I don't think it's that different than any other Central or South American mission. I think it's actually even maybe safer. But I always felt safe. I can't remember a time when I felt unsafe. So that's a big concern, and just keep that in mind, that if you're obedient, you're going to be fine. The city actually itself is kind of a big melting pot of people from all over Mexico. A lot of people go there to get jobs in factories because there are a lot of factories in that city. And people will come because the consulate there is a big one, and it's where you can get a visa to come to the United States. So there's a lot of reasons that bring people from all parts of Mexico there. And there's not really that many touristy places. Like downtown Juarez, it's called El Centro. I mean, there's some cool shops and some cool things you can get, and there's a big JRZ that you can stand by and take a picture that stands for Juarez. The other tourist attraction is the X, La X. It's this big red X that's right up against the border. You can, apparently if you pay, you can go up inside of it. I never did, but it was in one of my areas. And you can see it from all of the surrounding areas nearby. And some people go there. But mostly, I don't know, we'd find fun things to do together on preparation day, or we'd be too busy preparing to go tour around. One of the perks of having people from all of the parts of Mexico living there is that when you eat with the members, you have members from everywhere, and you get such a variety of Mexican food because there's different food in different states that's more popular. And it's fun. You get to taste all sorts of delicious things, and you can go to restaurants that the owners are from different states in Mexico, and you get a good variety of food. So Casas Grandes isn't really a city. It's like a collection of small towns. So if they refer to the region of Casas Grandes, it includes a bigger town called Nuevo Casas Grandes, and there are several wards there. It actually has wards from 2 different states in that town. The town that I was in is just called Casas Grandes, and they sometimes refer to it as El Pueblo, which means the town, just so that they can differentiate it from the rest of the region. There's also Colonia Juarez and Colonia Dublan that are 2 of the Mormon colonies that still have survived, and the temple's in one of them. And so all of that together becomes Casas Grandes, and it has 2 stakes in it. I think it is beautiful, especially in the summertime and in spring, because there's a lot of pecan trees and peach trees, apple trees, and a few other kinds of things growing. So you'll see like the blooming in the spring, and you'll see all of the colored leaves in the fall. It gets pretty cold in the winter in actually all of my mission, which people may not expect. But they are 4 seasons, and I think it's beautiful. It's really green in the summer. There's a river going through it. It's on the edge of a mountain range. So when you get up into Colonia Juarez, you're actually entering a mountain range. It's in the mountains. There's a church school there that many people don't know about called Juarez Academy. It's a middle school and high school, and it's a bilingual school. So there will be the white kids who've grown up there in the colonies who go there, and they're learning Spanish and English. And then there's also Mexican people from the other towns nearby who are members, and they'll go there and they'll learn really good English as well. So it's interesting to go to state conferences because you hear people speaking English and Spanish. Everything will be translated into English in another room, but it's usually given in Spanish. When you talk to members from the colonies, it's really fun because they'll talk to you and say, "Hi, Sister Clark," and turn to your companion and say, "Hola, Hermana Ramirez." And they'll just switch so quickly between the languages it gets kind of confusing, but it's a fun time. If you serve in the Mormon colonies in either one of them, there is an English-speaking ward in each one and a Spanish-speaking ward in each one, and usually one companionship will cover both of them in each of the colonies. So that's interesting. There's a lot of Mennonite colonies nearby too. So when you go into Nuevo Casas Grandes on preparation day, you see missionaries everywhere and Mennonites everywhere. And it's just something you maybe don't expect to see in Mexico. And you hear them speaking German, but they also speak English and Spanish really well. And that's interesting. So the area is called Casas Grandes, which means big houses in Spanish, because there are some ruins there that are called Paquime, and apparently in whatever language that's from, that means big houses. So that's why they've called the region Big Houses. But I went to the ruins once on a preparation day and saw them, and it has information about how these people had big houses that were meant for different things. And you can go there on a preparation day if you're serving in that area and kind of learn more about it. And that's why it's called that. There's some amount of tourists that will come through to look at those ruins and also go further up into the mountains to a place called Mato Ortiz that's famous for its pottery. and artisan work. And I believe the sisters who are in Colonia Juarez also go to Mata Ortiz because it's in the same ward. But I was never that far out. But it's a really cool mix of cultures in that area. You have people from all over the place, and it's not maybe what you expect from a traditional Mexican culture. I loved the food in my mission. I crave it all the time now. It's not Taco Bell, so don't think that that's Mexican, because it's not. Yeah, you definitely eat tortillas in just about every meal. Sometimes you'll have tacos. Taco shells don't exist. You eat it with a flat taco with meat in it, and then you pick it up. What they call street tacos here, that's what tacos are actually like. But they'll have it with different meats in it, and it's all really good. In northern Mexico, they also eat flour tortillas, which they don't use in the south. The members in my mission would make their own flour tortillas, and they were delicious. So they're also, burritos are from northern Mexico, especially from Chihuahua, where my mission is. So that's also something that you get to enjoy. What we make called taquitos here, they always call flautas there. So they're just like a round tortilla with meat in it, and those are really good. They make enchiladas, which are delicious. I got to try mole. That's a pretty typical Mexican food. It took some getting used to because it was really interesting and different the first time I tried it, but it's grown on me and I really love it. It's like this paste that has chocolate and chili in it, and it goes on chicken. It has all sorts of other stuff in it. So it's different, but if you just keep trying, you get used to it and then you like it. And there's a lot of things that are like that. They definitely eat spicy, but usually they're sensitive to missionaries coming from other places if they're feeding you, so they'll usually give you the salsa on the side. So, you can try it out. I got used to eating really spicy food, and it's delicious. So, pretty typical. You have some sort of main dish, and you have rice and beans on your plate, and there's tortillas. But sometimes people would give us yogurt as dessert, which was interesting, but I like yogurt, so that's cool. But they'd also eat cake that's similar to the cake that we eat for dessert. They give us ice cream. Because it's close to the border, there's some pretty American things, and sometimes people buy things in El Paso and bring them over. So that happens. But there's a few kinds of candy that are definitely Mexican that I love. There's one called jamoncillo. If you've heard of dulce de leche, it's similar to that. It's a variation of it, but it's harder, but breakable and soft at the same time. But it's really good. You can especially get that in Casas Grandes. If you ever hear of dulces de parral, they're the best. And I love tamarindo. A tamarind, it's this fruit that only grows in tropical places, so a lot of people in the United States don't know about it. But they'll have all of these candies that are made of that, and they'll have chili in them too, so they're spicy sweet candies, and they're delicious, but also an acquired taste. But a lot of the candy is spicy. And I love ice cream in Mexico, and there's a kind of ice cream that they sell in Ciudad Juarez called nieve de garrafa, and it's almost like shaved ice, but it's not. So that's also something to look for. That tastes really good. Probably the most different thing I tried that I actually had a lot is we'd have tacos de tripas. So tripas, that you could translate that to tripe or to intestines. So it's cow tripe. And they season it super well. It tastes really good, but it has a distinct aftertaste. So then once you've tasted it a few times, once you taste it, if you didn't know what it was before, you know that it's tripas. And I also tried lengua once, which is beef tongue. I tried it in a quesadilla, and it tasted so good, but the texture was really different. But some people get used to it. So those were the more interesting things. But I didn't really taste anything too crazy other than that. Well, I'd studied Spanish for 5 years before my mission, and in all that time in school, I always understood just about any accent except an accent from Mexico or the Dominican Republic. So when I got my mission call, it was just really funny and ironic that I was going to Mexico, where I knew I didn't understand their accents, and it proved true when I got there, because Mexicans speak really fast, and they use a lot of their own slang, and they stick all their words together and they run together and you have no idea what they're saying sometimes, but you get used to it as you interact with them and as you try to speak. Mexicans definitely have their own words for things, but even different states have different slang, or just different ways that they refer to things. They also have different accents. In the north, people from the south will often say that the people in the north sound like they're yelling all the time. And I think that's accurate. That's pretty much how they talk. So they're not always angry, it just sounds like it. But you get used to it, and then you start talking like that. And then you sound like you're yelling all the time. But Mexicans from different parts of the south sometimes will sound a little more sing-songy when they're speaking, or just, I don't know, have different inflections. Some of the weird different words that they use in at least the part of Chihuahua that I was in was that they would call cars muebles, and muebles means furniture. And it also means furniture there, but they will use it to refer to their cars. They'll call trucks trocas, which is also not typical in other Spanish-speaking countries, but it's an English adaptation. They have all sorts of fun Spanglish things. They'll say ride to, like, give someone a ride. So it's interesting and you adapt to it. It's fun to watch new missionaries come from other parts of Mexico or from other countries and get very confused at what people are talking about. So if you pick it up and decide which words you should also use and which words you can maybe just understand but not use, it's good to try and feel it out in your first while. Well, I felt like people were yelling if I'd walk into a house in the wintertime, and my companion and I would be super cold because we'd been out in the wind and it was cold outside. We'd walk into a warm house with the wood stove burning, and the mother of the house would give us a hug and kiss on the cheek and go, "Ay, hermanas, como vienen heladas?" Which is just, "Oh, sisters, you're so cold." But it sounds like she's yelling and angry at us, but she's not. It's just how she talks. But that's pretty much how you're always greeted. Hermanas! And it sounds angry, but it's not. I heard other missionaries who come from different parts of Mexico who they'd sound like they were singing when they'd introduce themselves. They'd say, "Yo soy la hermana Clark." And it sounds kind of like different tones. So that's fun. People from different countries, now that just gets way different. Peruvians speak a lot slower than Mexicans, and they'll also use different verb tenses sometimes. And it sounds really formal when they talk. I had a Honduran companion, and the Honduran accent is kind of like in the southern Mexican state of Veracruz, and they drop the S sounds off of all of the ends of their words. So if they're from Veracruz, they say, "Yo soy de Veracruz." Or if they're from Honduras, they say, "Yo soy de Honduras." And they don't say the S on the end of the words, and that is just consistent throughout their speech. So those are a few examples. If I were introducing myself and had a really bad, super American accent, oh, this is hard, because I've tried to get rid of it, but it might sound like, "Hola, yo soy la hermana Clark. Yo soy de Colorado." Something like that. Something that will just set you apart is if you pronounce your R's hard like we do in English. In Spanish, a single R sounds even like a D. Like you'd say Colorado, just like you flip it. A double R is the R that you maybe think all the R's are. You have to master the R if you want a good accent. The D is really hard in English compared to in Spanish, so pronounce it on the back of your teeth. It's almost like a TH, so like Colorado. And those are some basic tips. My tips for Spanish accent is to get the vowels down first and then pay really close attention to the consonants because they're a lot more different than you might think they are. So I could say, "Hola, yo soy la hermana Clark, soy de Colorado." In one of my areas, we had heard for about a week leading up to this that this message had been circulating that a certain cartel was going to come through and had a list of people they were going to kill, and so everyone should be inside before 10 p.m. for that whole week, or they weren't responsible for what happened to them. But they sent a warning. And we'd heard about it, and we didn't really worry because we're always in before 10 p.m. But then this one morning we woke up, we had a lot of lessons scheduled, but one of our investigators called and said, "My husband's a police officer, and he just told me that a lot of people were killed last night, and I just think that you should stay home." So we called our district leader, who called our mission president, who told us that he wanted us to stay in all of that afternoon, and then for about a week and a half afterward, he had the 2 zones in that major area all go home at 8 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. for about a week and a half while things were going on every night, and we'd hear about them every day. But we were super safe. And then it calmed down, so then we were just back to normal. We'd hear, oh, in this house 2 blocks away from the stake center, they killed 5 people. It was a safe house. And they'd see different things, and they killed 6 people outside of the hospital. But the craziest one was that they'd found tigers in a house, in one of the safe houses, that they'd used to devour evidence of their crimes. That was the sketchiest thing. They mostly, from what I understand from that experience, they will only go after the people they're looking for unless you're in their way or if you look like the person they're looking for. Sisters, but also elders on this first one, get really good shoes because in our mission, you walk everywhere. You will never have a car or a bike, and you will walk all the time. And if you have bad shoes, your feet can get hurt, and it's not pleasant, and it could end up escalating and you could go home early. So just really take care of your feet and get good shoes. Comfort and safety is way more important than them being cute. And as far as clothes for sisters, I would not get anything super expensive because you're going to get tired of it because you wear the same 6 outfits all the time, and you might just want to go buy new clothes eventually. And also, it gets really dusty and windy in the fall and in the spring. And sometimes you're just walking and you are getting completely covered in dirt all day, and that happens to your clothes, so it's just not really worth it to have really expensive clothes, but try to look nice. Get used to the fact that your hair is probably never going to look very good because it's really windy, but maybe find some good updos so that it's not whipping you in your face all the time when it's windy. And yeah, those are my big ones, but take care of your feet. Really take care of your feet and just your overall health. For the most part, sisters are really kept in the safest of areas in our mission. But even then, if you're out just towards the end of your proselyting day going home, sometimes there will be drunk guys on the street and it's dark, so stay off of the dark streets as much as possible, be in lighted areas. I would always walk with my phone in my hand, and I'd often have it open to my president's contact information, so if anything happened, I could just call him immediately without having to find his number, but I never had to. People will catcall, especially if they're drunk, and sometimes they'll try to speak to you in English if they're drunk, because a lot of them have heard some English, they're on the border. They're really drunk if they're trying to speak to you in English, so stay away from them. And they'll catcall, and they'll yell, "Güerita," which is like white girl. But just ignore them and keep walking. And yeah, don't talk to them unless you really feel guided by the spirit that you need to talk to drunk people. It's not worth it because they're not in their right mind, and that could be probably the most dangerous thing. Love your companions. I was with only 2 American companions for a total of less than a transfer. It was 5 weeks total with American companions. And I got a great experience being with all other companions from way different cultures. And it can be hard because it's the littlest things you might not think about that you have different opinions on, and then they can build up, and it's easy to get irritated with people. And just take the opportunity to try and see your companions as their Heavenly Father sees them, and to love them and serve them like He would want you to. And that's how you can get the best work done and really bless your companion's life. The opportunity to serve as a leader in the mission, no matter what it is, a trainer, a district leader, zone leader, sister training leader, assistant to the president, it's an opportunity to grow. And sometimes we have a tendency to think that if people are leaders because they're just the coolest people around and that's why they got called to the position. But when you get an opportunity to serve as a mission leader in any of those capacities, it is a time to serve. And it is an opportunity to learn about your own imperfections and how you need to be better, and it's an opportunity to do that. There's something they taught us in the MTC. They said that there is little growth in a comfort zone, and there's little comfort in a growth zone. And being a leader in the mission, especially training new missionaries, is a growth zone. So if you have that opportunity, please treat it like what it is and have so much charity towards people. And just remember the potential you have in Heavenly Father's eyes and try to reach that with His help. There was a big hailstorm once, really big. We were waiting for a bus and it wouldn't pass. So we stood up against like a taco cart thing with a little bit of a roof, and it was hailing really strong, so we then got underneath the counter because it was closed. But we said a prayer so that we could get to a safer place. Within 3 seconds of saying amen, the hail stopped. We ran to a convenience store and it started again. So have faith, but yes, hail, lots of hail, and if it rains a little bit, it floods. There's a lot of cockroaches in no matter what area you're in, so they run really fast. Just learn how to swap them. It's harder killing a spider. You just have to get them fast. And watch out for the ones that fly. And sometimes there's centipedes that are about that long and that thick, and they're really big, and they say they're dangerous, so we try to stay away from them. We had one in our house, but eventually we moved. We moved from that house because there was a big centipede and some bats in the roof. What else? There are a lot of dogs in the streets, a lot of them, and some of them are scary, but if they run up towards you, if you pretend like you're picking up a rock, they'll usually run away. Or if you pretend that you're going to throw something at them, they'll also usually run away. Or if you carry rocks in your hand and just throw them at the ground near the dogs, then they'll also run away because they'll be scared. I learned to be patient and to love people the way they are and not expect them to change. The first time I trained, I began to feel so inadequate and realized all of my imperfections, and it was great because then I knew what I could get better at, and I got to learn a lot about myself and improve. One of my biggest spiritual experiences that meant a lot to me was when some of my converts were being confirmed. It was a family of 5, and we'd taught them from September until January when they got baptized, but they'd been taught by so many missionaries before and just had run them all off, and then finally they listened to us. They got baptized in January, all 5 of them together, the parents and the 3 kids, and when they were being confirmed, 2 of the kids in their confirmation blessings had mentioned that they would serve full-time missions. And it hit me that what we can do in teaching one person the gospel, if one person gets baptized, sometimes we think it's not a lot, but it can have a huge impact in the future on a lot more people that we just can't even imagine. One time I was with a companion and I got to hear her talk about a lot of the struggles she'd been through in her life, and it was almost just too much for me to handle. And then she was talking on the phone with the mission president about them, and I tried to go to a different place in our house, but it wasn't big enough to not hear what she was saying. So I knelt down and I cried and I prayed for her, and that's probably what started me really wanting to come to love my companions as they were and as Heavenly Father saw them. I was lucky to already know enough Spanish that I didn't get many language tricks played on me, but some sisters tried once and it was funny. I asked them what you called the crust of a pizza, and they told me it was the suegra, but suegra means mother-in-law, and they were trying to say, no, that's called the suegra because nobody likes it, because nobody likes a mother-in-law. And I knew what it meant. I was like, you think you're funny, but you're not going to catch me on that one. But then I did find out that, at least where I was, they do call the heels of a loaf of bread suegras for that reason, because nobody likes them. Yep. Well, so if you've been called to Ciudad Juarez, know that the Lord called you where you were meant to go. Don't get worried about anything that people may say or may find on Google about it. Just know that the Lord knows you, and He knows the people that you're going to have an impact on in the mission. He knows your companions that you'll have, He knows your investigators and the members you'll work with, and He knows what each of you need to be able to grow and help each other. And just know that there are great people everywhere, and there are great people in Ciudad Juarez. And there are people who are waiting for you to come find them. I know that I went where I needed to go, and that every place I got assigned to was inspired. I know that mission presidents are inspired, and that the Lord really knows each of us individually. I know that He knew I needed each one of my companions. He knew that the investigators I taught needed me in some way. And I know that no missionary can become perfect, and that can get discouraging because we try to. But if we give all of ourselves and just do everything we can, the atonement of Jesus Christ makes up for our imperfections just as much as it does our investigators. So if you put into practice what you're teaching every day, the atonement of Jesus Christ, then you will have a great mission and you will do everything that he hopes that you do.